We are counting down the 20 British desserts that vanished when supermarkets took over. These are the puddings, tarts, and sweet confections that once crowned Sunday tables from the Scottish Highlands to the Cornish coast, but quietly disappeared as Britain traded rolling pins for plastic packaging. From wartime treats that stretched a few ounces of sugar into something magical, to regional specialties that could not survive the journey to a refrigerated shelf, each entry marks a turning point in how Britain learned to satisfy its sweet tooth. Expect ingredients your children would not recognize, flavors born in back kitchens, and the quiet tragedy of convenience. Which lost dessert tops our list? Let's begin the countdown with number 20. Prunes and custard anchored the pudding course in school canteens and hospital wards long before plastic pots ruled the supermarket chill cabinet. Kitchen staff stewed dried prunes until they turned soft and yielding, then ladled them into bowls and drowned them in thick yellow custard poured from battered jugs. By 1958, catering surveys recorded that prunes appeared on school menus twice weekly, a staple so ordinary it rarely earned mention in home cookery books. Children queued with metal trays, some wincing at the wrinkled fruit, others hoping for extra custard to mask the medicinal sweetness. Yet when supermarkets introduced instant desserts and chilled pudding cups, uniform in taste, and endlessly convenient, the institutional prune vanished almost overnight. Today, prunes and custard survive only in the long memories of those who once scraped every last spoonful from their bowls. Its disappearance marks the first quiet surrender to the supermarket age. Number 19. Semolina pudding arrived at the table in trembling mounds, a dish that divided Britain as sharply as any border. Dinner ladies stirred the coarse wheat grains into hot milk until thick and pale, then sweetened with sugar, and a blob of raspberry jam sinking into the center. In the 1950s, semolina cost just a few pence per pound, cheap enough for the tightest school budget. Oral histories from the Midlands recall children racing to claim the jam-heavy center, stirring the red sweetness through until the whole bowl turned pink. By the 1980s, instant dessert mixes were closing in, and with them went the recipes that could not be powdered. Semolina survives today only in a handful of traditional kitchens, a quiet ghost of the puddings that vanished when convenience took the throne. Blancmange wobbled onto sideboards across Britain when a proper pudding meant something set in a mold. Housewives heated milk with corn flour and sugar, flavoring with almond essence, then poured it into fluted copper molds to set overnight. By 1955, National Food Survey figures showed blancmange appeared in nearly 1 in 4 households each week. The ritual of unmolding was watched with held breath, the tap of the knife edge, the slow release, and the triumphant wobble as the pudding landed on the plate. Children poked at its surface, delighting in the way it trembled. Yet when supermarkets introduced instant pudding mixes and ready-made desserts sealed in plastic, the copper molds were packed away. The skill of setting a proper blancmange became suddenly old-fashioned. Today, blancmange survives only in vintage cookbooks and the memories of those who still remember the taste of a properly set Sunday pudding. Junket stood as the gentlest of British puddings, a dish that required nothing more than warm milk, rennet, and a little faith. Housewives heated fresh milk to blood temperature, stirred in a few drops of rennet, then left the mixture until it set into something softer than custard. In the 1950s, Junket tablets sold briskly at chemist counters for a few pence. Dusted with nutmeg and served with jam, Junket was the taste of nursery suppers, mild enough for teething infants and the elderly alike. Oral histories from the West Country recall the near-silent setting, the way a properly made junket could be cut with a spoon, yet barely hold its shape. Yet junket demanded fresh milk and careful timing, conditions the supermarket age could not guarantee. The rennet bottles vanished from chemist shelves, replaced by packets of instant whip. By the 1990s, Junket had retreated to a handful of traditional households. Its fading presence is a quiet testament to the way supermarkets traded simplicity for shelf life. Carrot pudding emerged from wartime kitchens when sugar was scarce, and ingenuity was the only currency that mattered. Housewives grated carrots into cake batters and steamed puddings, relying on the vegetable's natural sweetness to stretch precious rations. Ministry of Food pamphlets promoted the dish with earnest enthusiasm, and by 1944, carrot pudding recipes appeared in nearly every women's magazine. The taste was earthy and sweet, the color a warm orange that spoke of thrift. Children watched mothers stir the mixture, learning early that necessity could still produce something worth eating. Yet carrot pudding was a child of shortage, and when sugar returned to shop shelves, the recipes were quietly set aside. By the 1980s, carrot pudding had all but vanished from British tables, its memory kept alive only in wartime cookbooks and the stories of those who still remembered the taste of victory. Gooseberry fool carried the taste of high summer into kitchens across Britain, a dish that celebrated the briefest of seasons. Housewives picked tart green gooseberries from back garden bushes, stewing them with sugar until they collapsed into sharp, fragrant pulp. Folded through thick cream, the mixture became something both luxurious and humble, served in glass dishes to show off the pale green swirls. In the 1960s, gooseberry bushes lined allotment paths, their prickly branches heavy with fruit for just a few weeks each July. Children helped with the picking, fingers stained and scratched, knowing that the reward would be a bowl of fool after Sunday lunch. Yet gooseberry fool could not survive the supermarket revolution. Fresh gooseberries were too seasonal, too fragile, and too unfamiliar to modern shoppers raised on imported strawberries year-round. The bushes were grubbed out to make room for patios. Today, gooseberry fool survives only in farm shops and the kitchens of those who still tend the old varieties. Wet Nelly clung to the dockside streets of Liverpool as stubbornly as the salt air that blew in from the Mersey. Bakers and housewives soaked stale bread and leftover cake in sweetened milk, layered the mixture with currants and spices, then baked until the top turned golden. The dish asked for nothing more than scraps and patience, yet it delivered a pudding rich enough to satisfy the hungriest docker. By 1955, bakery windows in Bootle and Birkenhead displayed Wet Nelly by the slab, sold for a few pence to workers heading home. The smell drifted through covered markets and clung to wool coats. Children grew up with the name, never questioning why a pudding should be called Nelly. By the 1990s, Wet Nelly had retreated to a handful of traditional bakeries. Its fading presence is a quiet testament to the way supermarkets flattened Britain's regional palate. Manchester tart stood as the pride of northern school canteens, a dish as vivid as the bright yellow custard that filled its pastry case. Dinner ladies lined shallow tins with short crust pastry, spread the base with raspberry jam, then poured over custard set firm enough to slice. The finishing touch was desiccated coconut, and sometimes a glace cherry placed dead center. In the 1960s, a slice cost less than sixpence. Children fought over the cherries, picking them off first or saving them for last, while dinner ladies prepared for the next sitting. Oral histories from Greater Manchester recall the queue snaking through the canteen and the cheerful arguments over corner slices. Yet as supermarkets introduced chilled desserts, the canteen ritual began to fade. School kitchens closed, and with them went the Manchester tart's natural home. Today, the tart survives in a scattering of traditional bakeries, but the weekly pilgrimage has all but vanished. Cabinet pudding warmed the dining rooms of Victorian and Edwardian Britain, a dish that transformed stale sponge fingers into something quietly magnificent. Housewives lined buttered molds with glace cherries and angelica, packed in layers of sponge soaked in egg custard, and then steamed the molds until the kitchen filled with vanilla-scented warmth. The result was a golden domed pudding studded with jewel-bright fruit, turned out onto the best china. By the 1950s, cabinet pudding still appeared at Christmas and at special occasions. Children watched the unmolding with wide eyes, the slow release, the gasp as the cherries came into view. Yet cabinet pudding belonged to the leisured kitchen, not to the age of convenience. Supermarkets could not package the slow ritual of layering and steaming. By the 1980s, cabinet pudding had faded from even the most traditional tables, its memory kept alive only in heritage cookbooks. Number 11. Flummery carried the taste of ancient Britain into modern kitchens. It was a dish whose name alone spoke of centuries past. Welsh and Scottish housewives soaked oatmeal overnight, strained the liquid, then simmered it with sugar and orange flower water until it set into a pale, trembling jelly. In the 1950s, flummery still appeared on tables in the Welsh valleys and Scottish borders. Children poked at its surface, marveling at the way it quivered, while grandmothers recalled when flummery was reserved for harvest suppers and chapel teas. The taste was subtle, almost floral, a world away from modern desserts. Yet flummery could not survive the supermarket age. Its unfamiliar name and unusual preparation made it unsuitable for the modern shopper. Today, flummery is a rarity found only in heritage cookery demonstrations and the memories of those who refuse to forget. Clootie dumpling arrived at Scottish tables wrapped in the cloth that gave it its name, a dish that marked celebrations from hogmanay to harvest. Housewives mixed flour, suet, dried fruit, and treacle into a dense batter, wrapped it in a floured cloth, then boiled it for hours until the kitchen filled with the smell of spices. The skin that formed where cloth met pudding was prized above all else, dark and slightly chewy. By 1960, Clootie dumpling appeared in farmhouse kitchens from the borders to the Highlands. Children watched the unwrapping with held breath, the careful peeling, the reveal of the glistening pudding beneath. Oral histories from Aberdeenshire recall the ritual of the Sunday boil and the arguments over who got the thickest slice of skin. Yet Clootie dumpling could not survive the supermarket age unchanged. Its regional character and laborious preparation made it unsuitable for national shelves. Today, Clootie dumpling survives at hogmanay and in the hands of those who guard the old ways. Sussex pond pudding stood as the most dramatic dish of the English South, a suet pudding so unusual it survived in memory long after it vanished from tables. Housewives lined pudding basins with a suet crust, placed a whole lemon pricked all over in the center, packed butter and demerara sugar around the fruit, then sealed the basin and steamed it for hours. As the pudding cooked, the lemon released its juice, creating a golden, citrus-sharp sauce that pooled around the base when turned out, hence the pond. By the 1950s, Sussex pond pudding appeared at farmhouse tables across the Weald. Children stared at the lemon inside, daring each other to eat the softened slices, while adults savored the tangy sauce. Yet Sussex pond pudding could not survive the supermarket age. Its regional character and unusual appearance made it unsuitable for national shelves. Today, Sussex pond pudding survives only in farmhouse kitchens and in heritage cookery books. Figgy pudding rang through Christmas carols long after it vanished from most British tables, a dish whose fame outlived its presence on the festive board. Housewives mixed dried figs with suet, breadcrumbs, spices, and treacle, pressed the mixture into basins, and steamed it for hours. In the early 1950s, Figgy pudding still competed with Christmas pudding for pride of place, served with brandy butter or thick cream. Children sang the carol demanding figgy pudding without ever tasting the real thing, while grandparents recalled when figs were the fruit of celebration. The taste was rich and earthy, the texture studded with soft, jammy fruit. Yet figgy pudding could not survive the supermarket revolution. Dried figs became unfamiliar, and shrink-wrapped Christmas puddings offered convenience without effort. By the 1980s, figgy pudding had faded from all but the most traditional households, its name kept alive only in song. Eve's pudding brought the orchards of England into the kitchen, a dish that crowned stewed apples with a golden sponge crown. Housewives layered sliced bramleys in a baking dish, sprinkled with sugar, then spooned over a simple sponge batter and baked until the top rose and browned. In the 1960s, Eve's pudding appeared on tables across the south of England, the answer to autumn's apple glut. Children watched through oven doors, waiting for the sponge to turn golden and crack. The smell of baked apples drifted through kitchens, mingling with vanilla. Yet the pudding was a dish of the home orchard, not the production line. Supermarkets could not package the ritual of peeling and slicing. Today, the pudding survives in nostalgic recipe books and the kitchens of those who still remember proper English autumn. Steamed ginger pudding stood as the winter warmer of working-class Britain, a dish that filled cold kitchens with the scent of spice and treacle. Housewives mixed flour, suet, ground ginger, and black treacle into a dense batter, poured it into greased pudding basins, and steamed it for hours until it was dark and fragrant. In the 1950s, steamed ginger pudding appeared on tables from Cornwall to Cumbria, its fiery warmth the antidote to damp stone walls. Children watched the basin turned out, the dark pudding glistening with syrup. Oral histories recall the ritual of the Sunday steam, the rattle of the pan lid, and the satisfaction of a pudding that asked for little but gave much. Yet steamed ginger pudding could not survive the supermarket age. The sealed tins that appeared on shelves were pale imitations. Today it is a rarity found only in traditional kitchens. Custard tarts gleamed in bakery windows across Britain when a proper tart meant something made fresh that morning. Bakers lined shallow tins with short-crust pastry, filled them with egg custard sweetened with vanilla, and baked until the filling set, and the top mottled with distinctive brown spots. In the early 1950s, custard tarts sold for just a few pence, their wobbling golden centers the reward for the early riser. Children pressed noses to glass, choosing between tarts with more or fewer spots. Oral histories from the East End recall the Saturday queue, the banter with the baker, and the first bite through crisp pastry into creamy custard. The taste was simple but precise, a balance no industrial version could match. Yet custard tarts could not survive the supermarket revolution unchanged. The vacuum-packed versions were uniform and bland. As independent bakeries closed, the art of the proper custard tart faded. Today, artisan versions enjoy a modest revival, but the everyday tarts have largely vanished. Bakewell pudding drew visitors to the Derbyshire market town long before it was confused with its jam-topped imposter. Bakers lined pastry cases with strawberry jam, then poured over a rich filling of eggs, butter, sugar, and ground almonds, baking until golden. In the 1950s, Bakewell pudding was the pride of local tea rooms, served warm with cream. The taste was intensely almond, the texture somewhere between custard and cake. Children visiting Bakewell queued at the original shops, each claiming to sell the authentic recipe. Oral histories recall the market day treat and the fierce local pride. Yet the true pudding could not survive the supermarket age. National chains replaced the almond filling with cheap jam and icing, calling the result a Bakewell tart. The original pudding retreated to a handful of specialist shops. Today, most Britons have never tasted a true Bakewell pudding, knowing only the pale imitation that bears its name. Lardy cake rose from the baker's ovens of the West Country, a dish so rich it survived in memory long after it vanished from everyday tables. Bakers rolled bread dough with lard, sugar, and dried fruit, folding and turning until the layers multiplied, and the fat ran sticky and sweet through every strand. The result was a golden slab, crisp at the edges, soft and yielding in the center, with pockets of caramelized sugar that crunched between the teeth. In the 1950s, Lardy cake sold by the pound in bakery windows from Wiltshire to Gloucestershire, its shining surface a signal that the day's baking was done. Children tore off corners, fingers sticky with lard and sugar, while mothers warned against spoiling appetites, and fathers claimed the crispiest edges. Oral histories from the Cotswolds recall the ritual of the Saturday Lardy cake, the queue at the baker's door, and the way the smell drifted through village streets. Yet Lardy cake was a dish of the local bakery, not the factory line. Its short shelf life and regional character made it unsuitable for supermarket shelves, and as independent bakers closed, the recipe faded from daily life. The shrink-wrapped versions that occasionally appear bear no resemblance to the fresh, lard-rich slabs of the past. Today, Lardy cake survives in a handful of West Country bakeries and the kitchens of those who refuse to let go, a sticky, golden ghost of the desserts that vanished when the high street surrendered. Syllabub stood as the most elegant of British desserts, a confection that graced tables from Tudor feasts to Georgian drawing rooms, before quietly vanishing from the modern kitchen. Housewives whisked cream with white wine, lemon juice and sugar until the mixture foamed and thickened, then spooned it into glass dishes to show off the pale, airy froth. In the 1950s, Syllabub still appeared at dinner parties and special occasions. Its delicate texture was a mark of the hostess's skill. The taste was light and sharp, the cream barely holding its shape, the wine lending a subtle warmth that lingered on the tongue. Children watched mothers whisk by hand, the bowl propped against the hip, the cream slowly rising to peaks. Oral histories from the home counties recall the ritual of the after-dinner syllabub, the crystal glasses and the quiet satisfaction of a dessert that required neither oven nor mold. Yet syllabub was a dish of patience and fresh ingredients, conditions the supermarket age could not support. Ready-made desserts offered sweetness without effort, and the hand whisk was packed away in favor of aerosol cream. By the 1980s, syllabub had faded from all but the most nostalgic tables. Today, it survives in heritage cookbooks and the kitchens of those who still value the old ways, a frothy, fragile memory of the desserts that vanished when convenience became king. Queen of Puddings crowned the British table as the ultimate expression of thrift and tradition, a dessert so layered and lovely it sustained generations through the leanest years. Housewives spread a base of breadcrumbs soaked in warm, vanilla-scented milk, baked until just set, then topped with a layer of bright raspberry jam, and finally a billowing crown of meringue, browned under the grill until the peaks turned golden. In the 1950s, Queen of Puddings appeared on Sunday tables from the Scottish lowlands to the Channel coast, its three distinct layers a testament to the skill and patience of the home cook. Children watched the meringue rise and brown, begging to scrape the bowl, while mothers took quiet pride in a dish that transformed stale bread into something regal. Oral histories recall the smell drifting through stone cottages, the anticipation as the pudding emerged from the oven, and the sense of ceremony as the first slice was cut. By 1955, Queen of Puddings featured in nearly every school cookery syllabus, its method a rite of passage for young homemakers. The taste was a progression, the soft custardy base giving way to the sharp sweetness of jam, then the crisp marshmallow lightness of the meringue. Each layer depended on the one beneath, just as each generation depended on the one before. Yet Queen of Puddings could not survive the supermarket age unchanged. Its layered construction and need for a skilled hand made it unsuitable for factory production. The chilled desserts that filled supermarket shelves offered sweetness without ceremony, and as convenience foods filled the freezers, the old recipes faded from memory. Today, Queen of Puddings survives in pockets of tradition and the kitchens of those who refuse to forget. But the everyday desserts that once crowned British tables have largely vanished, casualties of a revolution that traded hearth and home for brightly lit aisles and shrink-wrapped convenience. Across all 20 entries, from the humble Prunes and Custard that opened our list to the triumphant Queen of Puddings at the very top, these forgotten British desserts tell a powerful story of loss, change, and quiet resilience. Some dishes, like carrot pudding and wet Nelly, stand out as the most striking reminders of a time when nothing could be wasted. Others, such as Bakewell pudding and Clootie dumpling, show how regional pride and family tradition shaped the nation's sweet tooth. The common thread is the slow retreat of the independent bakery, the home kitchen, and the patient hand, replaced by the bright uniformity of the supermarket aisle. Steamed puddings, set creams, and regional specialties could not survive the journey to a national supply chain. With their disappearance went the skills, the rituals, and the memories that made British desserts so distinctive. This ranking is not just about what vanished from our kitchens, but about what these dishes represent. The resourcefulness of families who stretched every shilling, the deep cultural memory woven into every steaming basin and glass dish, and the quiet tragedy of convenience. In the end, these 20 lost desserts are more than recipes. They are the taste of a Britain that satisfied its sweet tooth with ingenuity, turned scraps into celebrations, and found joy around tables that have long since fallen silent.